talks about how we transport students on the bus and so forth, dealing with medically vulnerable students as well as staff and so forth. So if you have not read this document, I strongly encourage you to, because it really gives you a snapshot of what we are required to do as an organization in order to open and what we are recommended or strongly recommended to do. So what have we been doing so far as a school district? I'll go into the third point to give you an update on the plan. The administrative team began last week. Usually they don't come back till August. The administrative team has come back earlier to help write the plan. We have various teachers throughout the organization participating in writing the instructional plan. This plan, going through all of these categories that I briefly mentioned earlier, is going to be presented to the Board of Education on August 10th. At that point, we will go into detail with the board our instructional plan to return to school for this fall. Ultimately, the board has to approve the plan. Several board members have been part of or sat in on just listening to the discussion, so they become more informed, but they will get a complete plan prior to the board meeting so that they can review it and be able to ask questions. So we are in the process of writing. We are actually beginning tomorrow. We're starting to put things into its final format and going through the checklist and figuring out what we still have to address and what we don't. There are some issues that we're still trying to resolve logistically because we have 1,500 students when you include the preschool, actually over 1,500 when you include preschool, and running a school and doing all the things that they're strongly recommending is going to be very challenging for us with the resources that we have. Though I'm confident we're going to be able to provide a safe environment. I do want parents to realize that this is not going to prevent anything. The stuff that we're doing is to minimize any potential exposure. It is impossible to say that I can prevent anything from happening, nor any superintendent to say in a district. What we are looking for is how do we operate and minimize the chances of anything happening with COVID-19. What have we done today? I'll talk about the fourth bullet on our list. When we talk about personal protective equipment, we have already we've partnered with the Macomb Intermediate School District. They have purchased a lot of the supplies on our behalf because they have a larger buying power, if you will, with 21 school districts in Macomb County. So to date, between what the district has purchased and what the county has purchased, we have almost 80,000 adult masks, about 50,000, about 65,000 student disposable masks. We have face shields that if we need to utilize for teachers and students, gloves. We have ordered, and the wipes should be in very soon regarding basically it's a Clorox wipe. It's a tub for every classroom that has about 40 wipes in the classroom, or in the bucket, excuse me. We have purchased hand sanitizers replacements. If you recall, we have hand sanitizers placed outside of every classroom door as well as by every office. We also now have hand sanitizing pumps, gallon jugs that we've purchased to replace what we removed from the classroom in March. Just a quick recall. There was a need by the emergency medical field and so forth regarding Clorox wipes and gloves and N95 masks. So we went through the district and was able to pull that out for our local hospitals and EMS units who were in need at that time of those supplies. We have now are replacing those supplies in the classroom. We have purchased 3 Clorox 360 machines, which is a sanitizing machine, one for every building, that allows you to go in, and it's a disinfectant mist that basically covers everything, computers, desks, chairs, that can kill any viruses that are living on the surface. We've purchased thermometers for each building to do temperature checks as needed in the office, depending on the individual. But we've also purchased temperature check stations that will be posted on the entrances to the building. That will be a screening tool for checking temperatures of students and staff and visitors as they walk in the building, where it reads your forehead or your wrist on the machine. These temperature check stations will also be installed on the buses as we begin transporting students to and from school. There's a lot more stuff that is on its way and coming, but we have been proactive. We have dividers that are on secretarial desks that have been installed. We are looking at some dividers right now. There's some samples in my office next door to go between computer stations for classroom, for computer labs that can't separate students as easily because of the computers and the wiring and so forth. So we've done a lot as a collective group, and I am very thankful for what the ISD has done in partnership with the County Executive's Office to order the large quantities. In our process, we began talking about what an option for parents, which is a virtual classroom. So here's what it looks like. In every classroom, there will be a camera that is installed. We have some of the classrooms have mock-ups in them now, as we brought staff in to get some feedback on them a couple weeks ago. All the cameras will be installed the week of the 10th and 17th in the district. So there's a camera mounted in the classroom, and a teacher has the ability to move that camera and capture whatever instructional images they need, so that the students at home who are virtual students will still be part of their classroom. They will still have an opportunity to engage with students that are in the classroom. We use two systems. One will be Schoology, which is the platform to basically get the assignments to and from. Then within Schoology, we will use Microsoft Teams, which is very similar to Zoom, but it's much more secure from a teacher end to be able to allow the students who are virtual to be part of the classroom discussions, to be part of projects that are being done in the classroom. So just to give you a sample, if I'm a high school or middle school student, I go to first hour, I would click on the link for that teacher's Zoom. I would be able to see the teacher, watch the teacher teach the concepts that I would be learning. I would pull my assignments down from Schoology, and from that, then I would be able to finish the assignment and then ultimately re-upload those assignments back to Schoology for the teacher to grade. I know it's a very simplistic process that I just described. I know there's some other steps to it, but in essence, the student is part of the classroom. The only thing different is they are just not there in real time. They're there virtually. If a teacher wanted to do group work or partner work, they could easily set up a laptop with the student in the class to be able to virtually, through Microsoft Teams, interact with the student at home and do partner activities within the classroom. When first hour is done, the student would then click on the link to their second hour class, given the 5-minute break between classes, and then they would begin their instruction in second hour. And that would go through the entire day for a secondary student. For elementary, if I'm assuming I'm in Mrs. Barrett's classroom and she starts her day with some type of a morning work activity, maybe it's a daily 5 or some type of assignment, that assignment would be in Schoology for the student to access for a virtual student. The teacher has the ability to program the camera. So if I do at the morning, I'm up at the whiteboard or the smartboard, the student is actually seeing what's on the smartboard. If after that the teacher goes to their rocking chair to read a story to the student, the camera would turn in the classroom and capture the teacher reading the story. The teacher has the ability to zoom in on that camera so the student at home can actually see the pictures of the book from their desk at home. From there, I may go to a math lesson back up to the front of the room. The teacher might use their document camera or smartboard for that instruction. Again, the camera would move to the appropriate spot in the classroom. If a class has music that day, the student would log out of Mrs. Barrett's classroom and log into Mr. Finley's classroom by clicking the link, much similar to the link that you might see on the website for the Zoom meeting. click on the link, and the student now would be in music class with Mr. Finley and the other students. So the intent is that the virtual option, this is the first of its kind in Macomb County as well as across the state, where we are providing real-time live instruction for students that are opting for a virtual classroom platform. If a student has a question about something at home, they either wave on the camera or there's a button that they can press in Microsoft Teams that allows a little hand to be raised so the teacher knows the student has a question. They can answer it and the whole class could hear the answer, or they can just speak to that student individually. So there's multiple options. This system also would allow students that have IEPs to be able to receive the services that they are required by their IEP virtually, possibly speech and language, TC, etc. If they need accommodations, so tests read to them or something like that that's being done, all that can be done through the Microsoft Teams. Our intent is for the families that choose the virtual option. We haven't established the dates yet, but the week of the 31st, sometime probably that week, we would host in the evening a family, get your equipment, get your computer, make sure you can log in, kind of a how-to for parents on how to use Schoology as well as Microsoft Zoom. The intent, if a student is choosing Microsoft or a virtual option, is elementary students, that there is at least an adult at the home that can assist the student in the instruction. That may not be mom and dad, because they might be working. It might be, grandma and grandpa, or an aunt or neighbor that the student has to stay with because mom and dad are working. But someone's at home helping the student click on the links to get into the classroom and be able to get the assignments. We are establishing a hotline for technology, both for in-class and out-of-class students, that if a student has a problem with the hotline, there's one number to call for the entire district, and it defaults to our 3 technicians in the district to provide support, whether it's you're struggling connecting to the internet or something went wrong with it. So I'm pretty excited, and after seeing the staff's input and the principal's input last week, this virtual option has much more, it's a lot more capabilities that we can utilize outside of just the COVID-related situation. We can use it for potentially if students are absent, if we have to suspend a student for some reason, they can still be part of the instructional and not get behind in their assignments if they've missed class, and so forth. So I'm going to encourage everybody to, number one, read the executive order to understand what we are required to do. We don't have a choice. If we want to receive state funding, we have to follow the requirements. The return to school roadmap, what is required, we are going to do. There are several items that are strongly recommended that physically and logistically we are just not going to be able to do those. In our plan, we have to identify what items we are not doing, so that everybody is aware of that we are not doing one of the recommended. So at this time, like the last one, I did kind of a brief overview of where we're at. I'm going to open it up to questions. If there are questions people have about the process, where we are, when to expect things, any concerns you might have about in the return to school. So if you just want to unmute yourself, and then we'll just take some questions from here if anybody has any questions.
I have a quick question for you. I have a student who has eczema, and it's on his hands as well as his face. He would not really be able to utilize the hand sanitizer. Luckily, he's in 5th grade, so just a little bit of mask wearing isn't too bad. Although, you know, it is something I'm concerned about. Will there be any issue? Would I need a doctor's note? It's very noticeable that he has it, and he's never had an issue before with not being able to use it with teachers. They've been able to send him to use the restroom to wash his hands. Is that going to be too much in this case?
I would say no. We would be able to work with each student. Obviously, I want to, being 5th grade, I'd want Mr. Bartels and Mr. Burkmeyer to be part of that. so that they can make arrangements with the teacher. When you read the plan, one of the things that we have to do is we have to schedule or plan times, particularly with the younger kids, where they are washing their hands or using hand sanitizer. So that would be when they do that, he would go down to the bathroom or use one of the sinks that are available.
Going to school.
The only thing that I worry about with that extent is then he's already touching dirty handles to and from. You don't know what kids touch in the hallway. You know, I'm worried it might defeat the purpose of sending him down there.
In the plan, we are moving some of our evening custodians to the daytime shift, so we will have more custodians during the day, because there's one of the plans or the requirements that we have to do is we have to have scheduled where the surfaces that students touch, such as doorknobs, might be copiers if they're making copiers for the older kids, because that's their printers, or bathroom handles, bathroom doors, have to be wiped down multiple times throughout the day.
Okay.
So part of that's probably going to be scheduling when different classes go down to either wash their hands and take a break, or utilize hand sanitizer. So again, this is where the importance of talking to the classroom teacher and making sure they're on board, as well as Mr. Bartels and Mr. Berkmeyer.
Right. And then as for the busing, because again, we can't get away from the sanitizer, would you recommend that I send him with gloves on?
When we look at the busing on it, and I just want to scroll to make sure I'm saying this right, we have to, it is required to use hand sanitizers before they enter the bus, or as they're entering the bus, however it's stationed on there. So if hand sanitizers are not available, we could make arrangements for gloves. We do have gloves for some students, for students that need it. So gloves might be an option to put on, so that when they're on the bus. When students enter the bus, they will be, there's three things that will happen. They will be screened just by a questionnaire of, are they feeling sick? Have they got a new cough, and so forth. For elementary students, we are assuming the parents have made that decision, that you have talked to your child in the morning, you kind of get a sense, are they feeling okay? Is everything correct? And that you've made the decision to send them because they are not sick. So, asking a kindergartner if they have a new cough or they got a new sore throat, it's probably not going to be the most reliable, but you know your child best. When they wake up in the morning, you can sense there's something different about them. When they get on the bus, for older kids, there'll be a self-check of questions that need to be answered to make sure that they are able to get on the bus. There is one of the hand sanitizers that is located outside of the classrooms will also be installed on the bus as you're walking on the bus. All of the stuff we install on the bus has to be on the driver's side or the front end of the bus. We can't put anything on the student side for safety-wise. And the third thing will be a temperature scanning. It is a device, probably about a 12-foot by 8 inches, that reads either the palm or the wrist of a student or the forehead. It doesn't have, you don't have to touch it or anything, and it will give you a reading of a temperature check. So it's just a screener. It doesn't mean that someone would have it or wouldn't have it, but it's looking at symptoms. And then ultimately the students would get on the bus with with a mask. They'd have to wear masks on bus. Now, we do have some students, unless there's a medical reason, particularly with a student, but we bought Blue Devil masks for all the students. We also have disposable masks, so if a student forgot it, we will have disposable masks for drivers to be able to hand out to students as they get out, but they do have to wear a mask as one of the requirements.
Okay, and then one last question for you.
Yeah.
I am leaning towards the virtual because of all of that. If we do virtual, decide that, maybe halfway through or whatever, that we'd like to come to class, would there be a way to get back on board to enroll to be back in a classroom as opposed to the computer?
Right now, and again, nothing is finalized yet, but right now, the last conversation we had as a group was we're trying to be able to help make sure teachers know what students they have to plan for in class whether it's 5, 10, 15 students or so forth, and what students are going to be interacting virtually, because it's another set of, or it's a different type of planning the teacher's going to have to do. So right now we are looking at, if you commit to one or the other, we're looking at having it be a commitment for one card marking. So at the card marking breaks, which is typically a natural break, units are done, you start new units, grades are issued for the first card marking, or proficiency ratings are issued. That would be a natural break. So as of now, that's the plan to put in, is at the card marking. However, if someone gets quarantined, for instance, let's assume a parent was exposed to, or someone in the family was exposed to, and the family has to quarantine. The virtual option could still allow the student to participate in the class while being quarantined. So there's a lot of options that we have with this virtual. Part of it is we have to maneuver the pupil accounting rules by the state of Michigan. When students are at Richmond or any district, they're coded either in person or what we call virtual. It's called a 50D a code for virtual. We just have to make sure that it's correctly reported to the state. So I say that right now loosely, that if there's a change, maybe you start off in the class and you realize, they aren't as comfortable as you thought, and you want to go to a virtual, or vice versa. You start off at virtual and you see what's going on in the class. You say, something, I feel much better sending my child. Right now, the plan is by the first Friday of school, which I believe would be September 4th. That's typically the day that we stop changing classes or moving schedules around. School of choice window closes that day, as well as registration for students outside the district. So the plan is the first Friday in September would be the day to define whether you're going to be in person or whether you're going to be virtual.
Okay.
Other questions?
I have a question regarding sports. So we're going to take all these precautions at school, wear masks, keep distance as well as we can. What type of safety precautions are they taking for the sporting events?
The sports during the summer season, as well as during the official fall season, which I believe starts August 10th, the official practice season for fall. We are following what is required by the MHSA, which is in the My Safe Start, the school return to school plan. As far as athletics, we have to follow the organization that we belong to. Richmond belongs to the Michigan High School Athletic Association, MHSAA. So part of that is they are to take temperature screenings before. They are to do checks regarding the same, have you had a cough? Have you, are you have any symptoms that might prevent you from practicing? They're supposed to the best of their ability, try to do social distancing. It's kind of hard with a football or a contact sport that you're not touching and interacting with another student, but we are following the MHSA guidelines. If we are in phase 4, which is where we are currently, athletics is scheduled to continue. If the governor moves the state to phase 3, based on the criteria that she's established that would define us moving to phase 3, athletics as well as in-person instruction does not happen. It's all virtual. So the virtual plan that I described to you, the intent is that is the virtual plan. If we're in phase 3, we're still offering that, but we're offering that for all kids. So you're still getting the instruction by the classroom teacher, which was a little, very much different than what we did in the spring, where packets were mailed or stuff was sent home, and there might have been Zoom meetings or virtual meetings 2-3 times a week, sometimes daily, depending on the classroom or the age group. But a lot of the instruction was done by the parent as being the primary, along with the teacher. In this plan, the teacher is the instructor, so we're trying to keep the learning to continue and kids engage in the learning process. So as far as your question on athletics, All the requirements that the MHSA requires, Mr. Reinhardt, the athletic director, has worked with the coaches, and they are implementing those strategies. Again, it's a constant reminder, because as you're out on the football field or whatever sport, soccer, if you're at the cheer, sometimes your natural instinct is to go back to what we know how to do and how we interact. And we got to constantly remind people to keep social distancing, cover the mouth with a mask and so forth when possible. After there's a contact, using hand sanitizer, washing hands thoroughly, etc.
We had a question, and that was just with the buses. So a typical day, we have 2 boys that go to the middle school and 1 son that goes to high school, and they all 3 ride the bus. So what would a typical day, getting on the bus, getting off the bus, going to school, how would that all work now?
The bus schedule, right now we have two plans that we are formulating. And I'm gonna be completely honest with you. We have not decided if we're gonna be able to do one of the plans. And here's the plan. Assume everything is the same as it was last year. At the bus stop, the difference would be the times would be a little bit longer between buses, because it's gonna take longer to go through the checks and getting kids on the bus, make sure they have the mask and so forth. Getting a sense of how many students that normally would have ridden the bus or rode the bus, who are now virtually, and how many less students that would be on the bus. Windows would be down on the bus, weather permitting, to create the air circulation. So students stopping at the bus stop would come on, they'd go through their screening question, they would get a temperature check, they'd use their hand sanitizer or put on gloves if we need to with certain students. Be issued a mask if they do not have a mask. And then come have a seat on the bus when we would drive around, and the bus would drop the students off where they normally do in front of the middle school and then at the elementary school. And the students would be again checked as they're walking into the building, because we don't know necessarily if it's the busser, if they always rode the bus, or if mom or dad drove them that day. So there's a second check as they're walking in the building. That's plan 1 of what we've done in the past. Plan 2 is we are looking at what it would cost to run what is called a 2-tiered bus system. So basically we would have 2 start times that would be an hour apart. So high school, middle school might start at one time, elementary might start at another time, so that we have less students on the bus, and we'd have to adjust some runs to do that. There's a cost to that, and that's where we're trying to figure out, can we financially afford it from the perspective of all of these items that we've put in place, or the partitions we bought and so forth. We have received federal funds, some of that. We received $188,000. Part of those funds went to the private schools, St. A's and St. Augustine, because we're required to give them a portion of our federal allocation. Part of the funds went to maintain counselors and so forth. When the board approved their budget in June, they approved a budget that called for a $700 per pupil cut. Currently, there is a $1.4 billion shortfall in the school aid fund, which equates to every district getting a $700 per pupil cut. We did build a budget on $700 per pupil cut. You may have heard in the news that there's some stimulus packages out there that are being talked at the federal level that will be targeted for pre-K through 12 schools and local governments. If that comes in, that will help tremendously from the finances, because of the impact that shutting down the state and people not buying things has done to the school aid fund. So the second option would be a 2-tiered, but there's a cost to that. In essence, you're basically doubling your payroll cost, because instead of the bus driver driving for 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the afternoon, they potentially drive 6 to 8 hours in a day. You're doubling the fuel cost, because instead of making 1 run every day in the morning and 1 run in the afternoon, you're doing 2 runs in the morning and 2 runs in the afternoon. again, we are looking at all options to try to minimize and space students out on the bus.
Are we on?
Oh.
Hi, I have a question.
Yes.
Has Richmond consulted with other school districts? Like right now, Detroit has school programs running for summer school. They've worked on the distance between students in a classroom.
Well, we have consulted with the 21 school districts in Macomb County ever since the closure in March, and throughout the entire May, June, and July. The districts use it at least on a weekly basis. Sometimes it's 2 and 3 times a week. We have been working together collectively trying to figure out how are we doing these requirements and the spacing. The challenge that we as well as other districts have is pretty much everybody's classroom is slightly different in size and scope. Our classrooms are typically about 30 by 30 in the elementary, 30 feet by 30 feet in the elementary school, and approximately 32 by 32 in the high school. Though it varies based on the layout of the room. So we have been consulting with other districts and talking how we are operating. Macomb County as a whole, all 21 districts are planning for in-person instruction and a virtual option for families. There are some districts that have announced that they're going to start virtually and not do in-person instruction. Off the top of my head, I believe it's Ann Arbor, I believe West Bloomfield, and I want to say Lansing, but don't quote me on that one. There was somewhere around the state capital. But there are districts that have chosen to start virtually and not do in-person instruction. We are still required by the state's pupil accounting laws to schedule at least 180 student days, and the total hours of instruction has to be at least 1,098 hours of instruction. We still have to meet those requirements. So some districts have put a plan or have talked about outside of Macomb about doing an alternate day where some kids come on Monday, some kids come on Tuesday, or vice versa. Some have talked about doing a half day where half the kids are there in the morning and half the kids there in the afternoon. For Macomb County, the decision is collectively is we are planning for in-person and a virtual option for families.
Do you think that that might be something possible Richmond could look at, maybe 2 days, so we don't have so many students in school with as high as COVID is starting to go back up in Michigan? I know Novi, they were talking about where, the hallways are getting marked, their classrooms, they are switching, that maybe we need to reach out a little bit more than just staying in Macomb County, because we do have a lot of students in our classroom, and that would help make a decision. I know for my husband and I, if we would send our daughter back into school compared to her learning online this year.
Well, we are putting the marks in the hallway in terms of trying to get directional, particularly more at the high school level. Elementary is a pretty much self-contained. The elementary, because they are a singleton class, stay within their classes. When they go to the lunchroom, there would be at most no more than 2 classrooms in the lunchroom at the opposite ends, but they're staying with their class and sitting with their class. At the high school and middle school, we are discussing the option of not using possibly lockers and having students either keep their materials in their classroom or in a backpack as they need to move around. Or if we're going to issue lockers, be on a staggered schedule so that not all, for instance, at the middle school, not all 500 kids are at their, or like 400 if you take 4th grade out of it. 400 kids are at their lockers. In high school, not all 500 kids are at their lockers at one time, because you're not promoting that social distance or spacing students out. So we have been contacting and talking about what other districts are doing.
Okay.
The challenge with an every other day model, it's not that it can't be done, is under the current law that we have to abide by, we have to schedule 180 days. So if you're only doing half the kids, you're adding more days of instruction for a teacher and support staff and costs that currently the state is not funding. So each district would have to figure out a way of doing that among themselves.
So if they did like Monday and Tuesday, then Wednesday and Thursday, they did work at home for those days, and then maybe Friday, something like that. You know, maybe a virtual learning or a combination of both somehow.
Again, it goes back to the pupil accounting manual and the definitions that are in those manuals. To be a virtual student, there are two types of virtual students. We are operating as what's called like a distance learning virtual, where in a normal situation, students are on site and the teacher is off site, and the teacher live streams in with the student. That's the traditional distance learning. The state is rewriting that definition to add students off site, teacher on site, to allow for what we talked about in our distance learning model. So we just have to make sure that we follow the pupil accounting manual as required by the state. All districts have to follow that to account for their students. Other questions?
Hi, I have a question. With obviously the whole corona thing going on, will absences be a little bit more lenient this year, or are they still going to be, I think don't quote me, like 9 and then you get sent back to truancy?
We are looking at a couple of the policies that an absences is going to be one of them. It was brought up, I believe, at the 9 o'clock session that we had. We're going to have to look at that and create some exceptions to that policy because of the virus. So, for instance, if a student's in lockdown, they're still engaged in class and they're still engaged from home, but they're just not physically present. We wouldn't necessarily count those as absences. So we are correct. We will be adjusting that policy. This plan that the board is going to receive on and ultimately have to vote on August 10th really needs to be looked at as the first of many drafts, because as things change in the environment that we're in and the requirements from the state, we're going to have to tweak and adjust the plan. As things come up, we're going to have to adjust. Like, for instance, in this morning, one of the parents talked about their child maybe not wear a face mask, but wear a face shield. The requirements say a student has to wear a face covering. Well, the shield that they have clips onto a baseball cap. So it slides over I'm guessing, the brim of the baseball cap. Well, currently our policy is we don't allow hats in school. But we more than likely will have to adjust the policy if we're talking about having students wear face masks rather than face shields rather than face masks, utilizing potentially a baseball cap. We're going to have to look at the tardy and the absence policy, because if for some reason a student goes to log in second hour and for whatever reason the internet goes down at their home or something and there's a glitch, but they're able to get in 10, 15 minutes after the class starts, we're going to have to look at that attendance policy and when we actually start marking students absent if there's a legitimate technical issue that happens. And it's going to happen. It's, we've all have dealt with technology or computers in some fashion. It's going to happen.
For sure. And then 2 more questions for you.
Yep.
Playground, like the recess for the 4th through pre-K, I had questions about how that's going to run. And then also, are we going to look into air conditioning if we're going to possibly start school sooner, or, keep the kids in the class? It gets pretty hot in there. I don't know if that's something that we can look into, or if,
Well, on the bond renovation regarding the air conditioner, in the scope of the work at the elementary school, we are adding air conditioning to the elementary school, and it is on the plans to add air conditioning to the high school and middle school when those bond renovations come. For the elementary, that work will be happening primarily next summer, the summer of 21. So we still have 1 more school year. So in terms of the classroom and the air circulation, we are programming our unit ventilators to constantly run to circulate the air. You may ask a teacher and they'll probably tell you it runs constantly now. Part of that is due to the unit ventilators the heating units and in some cases cooling units, depending on certain areas. They measure the CO2 levels in classrooms. So as the CO2 level rises, it brings in fresh air to circulate that. So it's an acceptable level. We're going to keep those univents running during the hours of school to circulate that air. We normally keep doors to the classrooms closed for security reasons. We are going to be allowing them to be open to create a circulation with room windows and so forth across. I believe at the midday 12 o'clock session, there was a conversation about fans. I did start looking into, can we purchase certain fans to help circulate the air. Fans we have to be careful to make sure the wiring on the fans is close enough together, particularly at the elementary school, so fingers don't get into the fans from a safety mechanism. Your first question regarding playground equipment, that would be part of the scheduling of the afternoon custodians coming in during the day now. They would pretty much be scheduled to clean all day long. Cleaning the teacher's room, particularly on their prep hour, to go in and clean and vacuum and get it ready for the next day, rather than in the evening. It's going to be done during the day. Washing down door handles, sink faucet. When the scheduled recess, to be able to go down and wipe down or sanitize, either using the Clorox 360 or some other device to sanitize the playground equipment. So those are things that as the principals and I are working together, there's a lot of logistics that have to be worked out even beyond the plan. The plan's going to talk about sanitizing the equipment, and now the next step is, okay, how does that look? You might have gone into maybe like a, I don't know, a restaurant or something, and on the back of the door they have a checklist of when the bathrooms are supposed to be cleaned. More strategic and more systematic planning is what we're going to have to do for all of the areas of the building when we're looking at sanitizing and cleaning. For the recess, there more likely would be scheduled recesses so that not all the kids are out there at one time. At most, it might only be 2 classes, and time to be able to wipe down or do things. It might be, immediately after recess, washing hands and using hand sanitizers. Other questions?
Is the kids that are going into 4th grade, they are going into the middle school, or are they going to stay in the elementary school?
4th grade moved to the middle school last school year, and they will be there again this school year. And so they are at the 4th grade through 8th grade is at the middle school. 4th grade is more of a self-contained classroom, we call it, where it's one teacher primarily the whole day, with the exception of like specials. 5th grade last year was a team teacher where they had 2 teachers, one for the morning, one for the afternoon, and then they had their specials teachers. So 4th grade does not get, aren't issued lockers. Their stuff is stored in their classrooms in cubbies, much like the elementary school.
I have a couple questions. So just like the day-to-day stuff, I mean, just trying to think, okay, my kids get into school, like for my middle schoolers, they're not going to be meeting in the cafeteria in the morning anymore, right? They're going to be going straight to their classroom, I assume? Or how's that going to
We're
work?
looking at because currently the middle school allows for students just to come in the building when the door, they usually open the door, I believe it's around 7:20. We are going to be looking at having the doors open at 7:30 rather than 7:20 to reduce the number of students congregating. That is a topic, and forgive me, I don't have the answer for you at this moment where 4th grade would be lined up, because we did have the conversation, Mr. Bartels and I, regarding an option of where we might have them different, because there's students in that cafeteria that are eating breakfast in the morning. We also talked about possibly doing a breakfast bag lunch, where breakfast is a bag lunch that you eat in your classroom. I don't know if that's available, because we got to watch on cleaning and sanitizing.
Okay, and then so the kids in their classroom, are they going to be able to play with one another? Are the teachers going to be really strict on the social distancing. Like, I don't want my kids to go to school and feel like they're not getting that socialization or, have the negative effects in those ways as well. So in recess, they can play together. They're not going to be like yelling at them to stay away, stuff like that.
Our intent is to try to run school as normal as possible. And I say that because in the classroom, I would still anticipate group work activities happening or them working on something. If they are in contact or close proximity or touch, there may be more, okay, let's take a hand washing break or a sanitizing break. There may be more of those scheduled. I would assume there's going to be more of those scheduled in the day based on the grade, to be more systemic about making sure that the hands are washed, reminding kids not to touch their hands to their mouth and eyes, etc. They're kids, though. I mean, we know kids, and all of you who have younger kids or had younger kids, they sneeze, they cough, they do all those things kids do. So we're just trying to minimize it. And I said at the beginning, we're not going to eliminate it. There's no way I can prevent anything that potentially could happen. But we can do our best to minimize it and try to keep normalcy to the classroom. When they're out playing, some of the things, and I can't think of something off the top of my head that may be a large group at recess activity. Maybe they're not allowing those, but they're allowing them to do other things and interacting with the playground equipment and kind of smaller groups. We want kids. That's part of the reason why we really want to start in person, because the socialization is a huge piece of a child's learning, particularly in the elementary and the early middle school, 4th and 5th grade. That's a key part of that they have to experience in order to have life's lessons as they grow older, how they're going to interact with people who are different from them. So we believe we're trying to keep it as normal as possible. I say that, I don't want to say tongue in cheek, because there are going to be situations that they're not going to sit 8 to a lunch table. Right now, we're looking at doing 2 per lunch bench, where before there was 4 kids on a bench. There will be a sticker on the lunch table that's basically every other spot. They're still going to be able to talk to their friends and socialize at a lunchroom table, but there just may not be as many of them at that lunchroom table. So there are going to be some changes they're going to notice, but again, we're trying to keep things as consistent as possible.
Okay, good. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
So with the like the sports, like football, cheer, things like that, are they required to wear a mask during those practices? Because if they're not, then they're going to be sweating all over each other. They got to touch each other, especially with cheer and football. But then they're going to go in the classroom and they're going to be touching everything and sweaty too. Why is it okay for the sports not to wear a mask, but
Well,
then kids don't?
currently for sports, there are certain things that they cannot do. Like, for instance, I'm going to read you the requirements for Phase 4 for athletics.
Okay.
The first one says we have to comply with all the regulations set forth by the Michigan High School Athletic. And there is a whole series of protocols they have put in place to screen and try to prevent COVID-19 exposures. We have to build in before and after practice hand washing, hygiene techniques after events and gatherings. So before the event, at halftime, after the event, we have to build in scheduled time where the athletes are washing their hands. All equipment that's used has to be disinfected. So if they're using a locker room to store their, and I'll just use football for example, football pads or so forth, that has to be disinfected after the use, which is where the Clorox 360 machines come in. It's kind of a wand mister that just goes over everything and kills any viruses that are living on it.
Okay.
Facial coverings are worn during the transportation. So if we're busing students from point A, Richmond to Algonac, they have to wear a facial covering. It says facial covering. That could be a mask. It could be a shield. They have to wear it on the transportation. Spectators are supposed to be 6 feet apart at all times. This particular one limits us to 100 people at a sporting event in Phase 4. I'm going to be honest with everybody. That is going to be very challenging for the district for the first football game. Or this, we have a brand new turf being put in. There's going to be a lot of people who are, I'm assuming, going to want to see it and see it in action. And right now in phase 4, we have to limit it to 100 people. They cannot use indoor weight rooms, indoor facilities in phase 4. So they can take the equipment and go outside and spread out social distancing, but any equipment used has to be sanitized. Just kind of going through. They have to have their individual water bottles clearly marked that these are their water bottles. And I know Mr. Reinhardt has been around to several of the sports teams' practices and reiterating and reminding. And again, I'll go back to sometimes people just unconsciously go back to old habits. This is how we've practiced last year and the last 3 years. And so they may forget about things. So we're constantly reminding them, hey, remember the social distance. Don't take a swig out of someone else's water bottle. Just drink out of yours, etc. So in that document, there's 2, 4, 6, 9 different items that we have to do regarding athletics.
All right, thank you.
No problem.
In regards to the athletics, like how right now you're shut down for 2 weeks because of the COVID cases, what's going to happen when sports do start back up? And say a student does test positive, are they all going to have to be quarantined, the team, for 2 weeks, or how is that going to work?
There is protocol that the MHSA has written regarding what happens if someone does test positive. The potential is the entire team could be. It doesn't mean it would be. Again, it's going to depend on the situation and the interaction. In what we just went through last week in the letter that I was sent out and that's on the website, we were told about some positive cases. And because it was summer practices, many of the coaches, prior to me even sending the letter out, had decided they were going to take a break and make sure kids are self-quarantine, if you will, so that they could be ready for their practices. That's one thing I am pretty proud of our coaches, is they really want our kids to be safe, and they're trying to do everything they can because they know the importance of what athletics does, not only athletics, but the academic clubs do for students, and they want to be able to offer them, but we have to be safe as much as we can.
No, I appreciate that. My son does football and wrestling, and he's out there with, Misco and all them. And I mean, they've been checking the temperatures, and they stay their distance away from everybody. So no, we are more than pleased with how they're handling the sports. I was just wondering, like I said, because, if we have this instance again, that, if they get shut down again for 2 more weeks, that's all. Okay.
And it's
case by case then.
We may have kids that may have tested positive but are showing no symptoms. But we still have we have to respond according to the MHSA for sports as well as the health department regulations. If someone was to test positive at class, there is a potential that class would have to be quarantined.
Right.
And would be on a virtual learning with the interactive, where the teacher might still be teaching, but all the kids are virtually. So we'd have to arrange for those that need laptops and those that have laptops, and making sure everything works. If
kind of like a case by case, we'll just kind of take
it is. And again, I'll reiterate, we're trying to open school normally, but we also have to take a lot of precautions. I was extremely impressed when our teachers came in, and we had over 60% of them participate when we talked about the camera system and what it can do. All the stuff our teachers are thinking about, how they want to be back in the classroom. The sense is they want to be back with kids, teaching and so forth, and to create some normalcy for students, but they also recognize that we're going to have to do business a little differently to provide some safety mechanism for our students and staff.
Nope, no problem. Nope, I like the plan. So far, so good. So, okay, thank you.
Other questions?
I have a question. For the kindergarten and first, maybe the grades that don't have the laptops already, how quickly would they be able to get laptops if you need to switch their class to a virtual setting, say if they're quarantined for a couple weeks?
We have enough laptops right now that we could issue every kindergartner and first grader a laptop right now. Part of that is because we replaced the middle school laptops last year. We are looking at ordering another set of laptops with part of some COVID or CARE dollars that the federal government has, but we haven't made that purchase yet. Those purchases are 6 to 8 weeks out getting those, because every district, if you think bigger across the state, has put in significant orders for technology. But right now, if we had to give every kindergartner a laptop, we do have the ability to issue them a laptop.
Thank you.
I have a question. Does anything look different for preschool? In regards
Preschool, it will look different. We are going to offer in-person preschool, the same preschool that we said we we're going to offer in the fall. 5 days, 3 days, full days, half days, etc. What's going to be different is the virtual option for preschool, and here's why. In a preschool classroom, we use the creative curriculum, and a lot of that has opportunities for students to explore and engage in certain areas and play. And so it's very hard to play on virtual. You can give kids things that they can do, but they wouldn't necessarily be on virtual. So a preschool's virtual might be the structured times where the teacher is actually teaching. Maybe it's calendar, maybe it's reading a book, it might be doing some math or manipulatives or counting. But when it actually goes to play, it's more likely going to be a partial schedule for preschool if they choose for a virtual option, or if we're moved to phase 3 where all preschool students have to be virtual.
a phase 3 would be all preschool virtual, you said? Yeah, that would be okay.
Phase 1, 2, and 3 does not allow us to do any in-person instruction. It's virtual.
Okay.
Phase 4 is virtual, where you could start in person. Phase 5 is in person as well as virtual. And phase 6 is where we were last year at this time. Very normal, whatever normal is nowadays.
Right. And now with the preschoolers, like you said, it's hard to social distance, and at that age, it's really important to engage with other children. I know another parent asked the same thing about what that would look like. Are they going to be able to play with each other, or is it going to be like, you can't come near me,
The intent is they're going to play. The intent is that they're going to engage with other kids. There is going to be more structured hand washing times, whether it's in the classroom or they go down to the bathroom and they all do it. Those classrooms would be sanitized every night. The materials, the Lego blocks and everything would have to be sanitized using the Clorox 360 every night. So the intent is that they are, now where they might have had 4 people in the dress-up area, they may now only have 2. And again, I'm speculating because I'm not a preschool teacher by nature, but they may do some things like that where they're minimizing the number of kids in a center. That would cause more centers to be created, would be a concept. Again, I'm going to rely on the preschool and Mr. Koshin and Mrs. Napier to finalize and make those decisions in terms of preschool. Because they know that age group best, what they need. But they're going to interact. They're going to, I can't imagine a 3-year-old not running up to his teacher and wanting to hug them like they do now.
That's my fear.
And though, knowing that staff, I don't know all of their particular comfort level of them personally. We're going to provide our staff, because if I've had this paper mask and I have a cloth mask, and
that pizza tastes like lime.
Talking every day or all day long in a mask is very difficult.
100 people can be there.
So we sorry, I lost my train of thought, so apologize. Oh, they preschool teachers might want face shields rather than masks because they want especially when you're teaching language and words and so forth, you need to see the mouth, the structure of the mouth, and so forth.
Yes.
I can envision teachers making this a fun activity, and let's all have our superhero space shields on, and we all kind of wear them to protect us. I could see that happening with the great preschool staff that we have. But we're trying again to create as normal a classroom as possible for kids.
Okay, great, because that's definitely what we are looking for, with being safe, but also as normal as possible. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Walmsley, if I could interject for a second, since we're talking preschool. Just want to let all the audience know that we did meet preschool staff last week, kind of get some initial thoughts, because once again, for preschool, looking at the age group, this is going to be a lot different than any other grade. And we created a survey that we'll look at having for the parents, so we can kind of get an idea of some of their thoughts as we move forward. And we have another meeting with all the preschool staff probably next week, just get some final thoughts as we're looking at the plan. So, yep, preschool is involved in this. I know we've been talking about the K-12, which is the main part of the plan, but preschool is meeting, daily discussions via email. So as soon as we get some information, we meet with Mr. Walmsley, we'll get the information out as soon as possible.
And that is one thing that Mr. Kosha said, that there's going to be, they're creating a survey to send out for the preschool families. But when you look at the survey results that we had in our community, we have pretty much kind of two groups in our community. One that wants school back to normal with as little interruptions or maybe no PPE equipment, and we have others that are want a lot of safeguards and practices. And what we're trying to do is address both worlds. We don't have very many people that are kind of in between when you look at the survey result. We sent a survey out about starting school earlier. Again, those results are on our website. And the concept regarding is, when our kids come back on September 8th, they will have been out of school almost 6 months. They were last in school on March 13th, physically face-to-face, that Friday. So it's almost been 6 months since they've actually sat in a classroom. Now, they did stuff with teachers and so forth, don't get me wrong, but that face-to-face interaction. So, one of the concepts was, do we want to start earlier? And there was many that, because of the shutdown and not being able to do things, we were about 50% saying, no, I want to keep the same start time because I want to be able to hopefully have some family vacation, some weekend to get away, just be normal again, because so much has been shut down over the summer or limited in what we can and can't do as a group. So we looked at those. We decided not to expand or start earlier. So we're following the normal schedule that is on the website.
I have another question.
Yep.
Well, actually, I would like to say thank you one of my thing was, are you taking both sides into consideration? Because you have some families that, like you said, are totally one way and some that are totally the other way. So I'm glad you're taking both sides into consideration. But have you guys talked about, I'm sure it's in the opening plan that you talked about, but the different scenarios, for example, like if someone in the classroom, a child, does get sick, is that whole classroom going to have to get quarantined? Is it just that child? Is it case by case? What if it's just a family member? Is it just going to be that child who has to be quarantined, kind of same thing? Or
we have discussed this with the health department, and that is on a topic, so I discuss with the administrators tomorrow based on the health department's guideline. What they're looking at, or what we've been told, is kind of I forgot the name they use. It's on the drive, but it's like primary contact. So in other words, if I was in contact with someone that tested positive and I didn't know it, and I went and was with you for less than 6 feet apart, we were in a room for whatever, and then afterwards I found out that I was in contact with someone with COVID, I'm kind of a primary person. I don't show any symptoms. I'm not tested positive, but I go, you would be a secondary person. So depending on the situation, the secondary people wouldn't necessarily be in isolation or quarantine. So we have to look at where the infection or the interaction has been. It could be a child. It could be a class. If a child comes in and we're, in a classroom and it could be portions of a class because the way the teacher is structured, this group of 6 people kind of always stay together and this group of 6 people kind of generally stay together. It could be a portion. So the health department, when we have a reported case, is involved in those decisions, which is required by our plan. We have to contact and talk with the health department so that they can help make that decision, because they're ultimately responsible for the tracing to figure out who else has been in contact, who else may have been exposed. And so with elementary, it's much easier to keep it contained because of the nature of the schedule. In middle school for 5th and 6th, it's much easier to keep it contained. In 6th grade, their specials and their classrooms, it's contained, it's a little better. 7th and 8th grade, we start intertwining 7th and 8th grade in different elective courses. And so the cross-contamination, if you will, becomes a little more blurry when you start getting to 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. But at that point, we're also talking having kids be a little more responsible. They understand what they need to do, their own washing hands, making sure that they're, were you standing close? Did they cough on each other? All the stuff that we would be asking for the health department. So it varies based on the grade level and the situation that occurred. If you got exposed to someone in your household, and it may just be you and your child that's and not the class that's affected.
Okay, makes sense.
And I do hope that people do recognize we are limited on what we can share because of HIPAA, health information. Like I can't say, hey, Mrs. So-and-so was tested positive for COVID and, and she got it here, or they suspect she got it here. I can't give that information legally. So I can notify you that we've got a case, and it might have been in an off-campus or at a school function. I can give you some broad categories, but I can't give names or legally I can't because of HIPAA laws.
So sometimes it's like, if you can't actually give the name, then the people that were involved in that situation, they don't know exactly who it was. They don't know if they were really close to that person, you know what I mean? Then they can't really make a good decision for themselves, whether they want to,
You are correct from that fashion, but I think one of the things that is both a good and bad for Richmond being a small town is if someone's absent, people start talking and they kind of figure things out for themselves.
Right.
And I don't mean that in any negative way, just the nature of a small town.
Yep.
And we're a relatively small district when you look at other districts. So.
Yeah.
If a parent chooses the online virtual option, is there a deadline for them to make that decision?
Right now, we are looking at the first Friday of school. However, in one of the sessions that was talked about, I can't remember if it was the 9 o'clock or the 2 o'clock session, there was a parent that talked about, what if they need a little more time kind of to make that decision. So as an administrative team, we're going to talk about that, and then we will also make the recommendation to the board. But right now, we're looking at first Friday in so it'll be September 4th, and we're asking people to commit to a quarter. So once you're in and online, let's use it for a quarter, and then come end of October, beginning of November, when the quarter 2 starts, you may want to switch back, say, I'd rather go back to in-person. And part of that, again, and I don't remember if I said it with this group, so I apologize if I'm repeating myself, is to help the teachers plan for who's online and who's not. And again, as I said, there may be situations that force us to move kids online and virtual. For instance, if someone gets quarantined and has to go from in class and now they got to be 14 days at home, well, we're going to get them online, assuming they can do the work and there are no symptoms, so that they don't fall behind in their schoolwork and in the learning. So there are going to be situations that force us to have students kind of go back and forth.
You made mention of a Clorox 360 that's going to disinfect the school. Do you have the name of the mist, the chemical that makes up the mist that will be used?
I can get that. I don't have it in front of me.
Okay, and do you know if that's the same thing that will be used on the buses and how many times a day it will be sprayed into the school?
Well, sprayed in the school would be primarily at night or when we have to do the, like for instance, normally in a cleaning schedule, the teacher's room is cleaned at the end of the day. After kids are gone for the day, the custodians go around and clean a room. Well, if we're moving evening custodians during the day, during the teacher's prep would be when that classroom would be clean. So when the teachers go or the students go to art or music or at the secondary level when they have their prep time, the custodians will be cleaning the teacher's classroom during that scheduled time. So every hour there's approximately 5 to 6 teachers that have a prep period at the secondary level. In some cases, we would need the custodians like at around the 4th hour for lunch. We'd need them more in the lunchroom. So 4th hour teachers might have their classroom still cleaned in the evening. That schedule, the logistics is what we are. Once we know what teachers we have, where they're at, what room, which we do, it's just we're formalizing the schedule for each custodian, so that each custodian knows theirs. But I can get the Clorox 360 chemical makeup.
Thank you. And where will I find that once you have it?
Either if you want to email to me, I can place it on. I'll probably place it on the website and just put it as a reference to a question that was asked during the parent meeting. So right under the parent. These sessions, I did press record on them, so I'm getting the video converted to be on a YouTube link so we can upload it to the website. So my hope is tomorrow the 3 sessions will be online, so if people want to see them and hear the types of questions that were asked by other parents. There's a lot of similar questions, but there are some that were different. So I will get it on the website so that you can download the fact sheet.
I have a question. In regard to the 360 machine, like I know you had mentioned in another Zoom doing the art room, will there be a little bit of time for the chemical to kind of settle down before another class moves in for kids that might have asthma? I'm asking this for another family.
We have to schedule, there has to be a scheduled certain amount of time between classes because it takes time for the chemical to kill any viruses, and basically I'm going to call it settle down as you described before another class comes in. So
awesome.
We have to schedule those, particularly at the elementary school, that aspect. And again, that may not, we logistically, we may not be able to do that after every class, so we will go with wiping down and disinfectant spray that we normally would use in the cleaning of a classroom. And all of the disinfectant, in fact, I just had a meeting with our ABM custodial company today. All of their disinfectant meets the EPA standards that we're required to use in this plan. So,
thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
I actually have a few questions. I'm going to spare you some of the ones I'm sure you've answered before. We'll hear again. So this is actually going to be more pointed towards the virtual people. And, as our family is going to go, I pretty much know we're going to be 100% virtual. So I'm going to start with the first one, which is if there's a bunch of built-in time into the schedule for cleanings and moving through the classrooms or through the hallways carefully and all of that stuff, is that going to reduce the amount of face time that the kids are going to need from the virtual learning perspective?
The virtual learning and an in-class learning should be pretty similar, and here's why. And let me start with the kindergarten classroom, or let's go first, any elementary classroom. The live stream with the student and the teacher and the kids in class stays while the kids are in class. And let's assume at 10:15, the teacher said, we're going to take a recess break. So the virtual kids would be told, log back on at 10:20 or 10:30, excuse me, or 10:35. We're going to go out and take a recess break. If you can go outside, stretch your legs, and have recess at home. The teacher takes the in-class kids outside recess, comes back. The student logs back in, and the teacher continues teaching like they normally did. 11:30 comes around, and it's now lunchtime. So the teacher in the classroom would tell the virtual kids, okay, we're going to be going to lunch in about 5 minutes. Get your lunch back, log back in at 12 o'clock or after the half-hour lunch is over. While the virtual kids log off, the teacher's taking the in-class students down to the lunchroom. 1:15 comes around, and the teacher says, okay, kids, it's time to go to music with Mr. Finley. Let's close your books and get ready to line up. At that time, the virtual kids would log off of their classroom teacher, and in about 5 minutes would log back into Mr. Finley's virtual so they could be part of the music class. So the concept is there's not much difference in the time. For secondary, where they're changing classes, a teacher may do a lecture the first part of the hour. The second part might be, okay, here's the assignment, and the teacher either walks around or checks on students' progress, and the virtual kids could be working at home on that assignment. The teacher can go over to their computer and say, hey, Johnny or Sarah, who's up virtually, how you doing? Any questions? Let me explain, so forth, provide support. At the end of first hour, the kids would log off. The other kids in the school would leave their classroom. There's a 5-minute break between classes we have at the high school. And so then second hour starts. And so the virtual student would log into their second hour teacher's Microsoft team group. So again, in the secondary level, the same downtime occurs for virtual as it does for in class. Between classrooms, okay, we're going down to the lunchroom, come back in at 11:35 because we're going to have lunch. The kids are going down to the lunchroom at the high school, and the virtual kids would have lunch at their home.
Okay,
so the downtime is pretty similar.
Yeah.
There may be a little more downtime from a virtual because like at elementary, teachers have to line them up. There's usually, someone's shoelace may be undone and the teacher's tying, so there's some stuff like that may occur where a virtual student would experience that. Right.
So the school day isn't getting any longer or shorter then?
No.
That you anticipate?
It would be 7:40 to 2:40 or 7:50 to 2:50.
Okay. So then if the virtual kids are expected to be connected during that time of 7:40 to 2:40, right? That's like 7 hours. That's a 7-hour school day, right? How much of that are you expecting it to be actual instructional time of that 7 hours? Do you have that number?
Well, it would be dependent on the course. So for instance, if Mr. Slater's activity is a demonstration, or Mr. Ladd may be lecturing all day because they're doing notes on the Revolutionary War or so forth, that hour might be a full hour of teacher-directed instruction.
Yeah.
It could also be the first 20 minutes is the assignment, and Mrs. Wolf might be going over the quadratic formula, how to solve the equation, and the second half of the hour might be, here's the assignment to work on, I want to see if you got it. And so practice it. So if kids have got it, much like what they do now, and get done early, they may get done early. They may be exit tickets. Before you leave first hour, oftentimes teachers will use exit tickets and ask a quick comprehension question to see if kids understood the concept that was taught today. So I can't say that there's a specific number because it depends on the class and what they're teaching that day. You may have some days where you are direct instructing the entire hour. And there may be some days where you are, and this is more for the older kids than this in the elementary, but there may be days that it's only half hour and the other half hour is time that the teacher can monitor to see, are you getting what we taught you? Have you understood the concept?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that kind of time frame is going to be a lot more manageable for the older kids. They're going to be, used to requirements being placed on them to meet expectations. I'm more thinking about my first grader and her ability to sit there for 7 hours of educational time. And yes, she's going to get breaks, but like what's expected of her, whether it's me or my husband, or whether we have to hire someone, but who's going to help her is she going to be expected to have someone there to help her get through this 7-hour day?
The expectation of what we're assuming at the elementary school is that there is an adult at home helping the student with the technology. The instruction is done by the teacher. Now, I say it as a former elementary school teacher, there is time when you're passing out papers to kids, there's downtime that the virtual kids already have their assignment while the teacher's passing out, or okay, we need to get crayons out because we're doing this activity, and you have 1 or 2 students that may lack organizational skills, and we got to find where they put their crayons in their desk, so the teacher's got to help. So there may be those downtime, but that would be a normal downtime that we'd have in any classroom.
So you think that your expectation is that my first grader should be a pretty independent learner at home?
No, my expectation is that once they're on the system, the interaction, the ability for a teacher and that first grader to be engaged with the classroom like they were sitting there is what we're trying to accomplish. It is not ideal, but it's the closest thing that we can get to an actual teacher with the student. So for instance, if Mrs. Ranger is doing a science experiment and the classroom is watching, that person at home, that child at home, can also see it up close and watch it with the other kid. If they're doing a discussion about, okay, why did the river evaporate, what caused it, and they're talking about that in the classroom, the student at home can hear the students in the classroom in that conversation, and vice versa. If the student at home is called on to say an answer, the students in the classroom can hear the student at home. So again, it's not a live teacher, but this system is as close to being there as possible.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I know it's certainly not a perfect scenario by any stretch for anyone, really, but I'm happy to see how it plays out. I guess I've only got one question with a part B left. Do you know what the current ratio is that you guys are expecting of face-to-face versus virtual? Like based off of the survey or just any sort of
we had the survey in June indicated 94 families were not sending their students back and wanted a virtual, 94 students wanted a virtual option. That's basically 1 in every 14, 15 kids in the district.
That's a pretty low percentage.
Currently, I want to say, I didn't pull up the file before tonight. We are probably nearing 70 that we've got names and in grade levels. When we looked at it last week as an administrative group, and if there's an administrator on it, help me out, it was about 4 to 5 per grade level of students. And at the time, I believe when we looked at it, there were no 9th and 10th graders, though we do have now 9th and 10th graders that have requested a virtual option. So in a class of about 100 kids a grade level, you've got about 5 kids that are opting for virtual. So in essence, we are spreading those kids among each teacher so that no one teacher has all of them together. David, does that memory, I see Dave and Anthony, is that about right, about 5 kids at grade level when we looked at that list last week?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so they're all going to have different teachers. So this actually segues into my last question, which is, this whole meeting's been about, we want school to be as normal as possible, but it's not going to be for us. And how are we going to get to a place where, so now not only is there only going to be like 1 kid being virtual in each one of these classrooms potentially, they're not even learning from the same teacher. So we couldn't even sort of come together to figure out how to have a social life outside of school. This is by far the biggest concern by choosing to go virtual, obviously, is you're missing out on that piece. But I'm going to go ahead and talk for, I'm supposing, at least a big percentage of these people who are choosing. We're not choosing this because we want to. We're choosing it because we have to. So what's the support going to be for us? How are we going to work around this impossible idea that we're not going to get to socialize? We have to find other families that we can socialize with. And right now, it's not going to be any of those people that are going to school face to face. And now we don't even have them in the same classroom. I know I'm presenting a question.
When I say that, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's okay.
When I say about the different classrooms, so let's say there's 4 first grade classrooms and we have 5 students. So we'd have 1 in every student in every classroom, and then 1 classroom would have 2 students. So virtually, you account for the 5. The thought process behind it, number one, the virtual option came as a result of the survey in June when we saw that we have 90, I'll just say 100 families for the sake of argument here, 100 families that at that time want a virtual option. They didn't want to send their kids to school. And things now are very different than they were, or are different than where they were in June. So we tried to figure out a way that we want those families to still be part of Richmond, still be connected to a classroom, still see their classmates, still be able to interact with their classmates, but it's virtually. If a student chooses virtual, they still have the ability to participate in all the extracurricular stuff. They are a Richmond student. So if they want to do virtual and they are on, for older kids, the athletic team, they still could participate in athletics. It's a choice that families are making. So in terms of the socialization, unless they're involved in activities at the school after school that are running, which in phase 4, there's not much that is running after school, because we're very limited on what we can and can't do as phase 4. Phase 5, we could begin running a lot more extracurricular stuff.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if we're not coming to school, we're not going to be going to extracurricular activities either. I mean, I guess at this point, there just isn't an answer to my question, but I think what I'm looking for as we kind of move through this is a way to, be able to reach out to other families that are virtual and trying to find a community within ourselves. And is the school going to be able to help with that? I know that there's, privacy issues that seem to always come up with these conversations, but I don't know. I don't know how to socialize my kid when I can't even send her to school.
And I would go back to the way I started at the beginning. I don't remember which parent I was talking to. When we did the survey, we've got parents at both ends of the spectrum trying to educate their student in class, and let's be normal. And I'm cautiously, I don't want to send them back because of what's going on and the risk there, wherever you fall in that spectrum. And this option, we believe, is the closest that we can get to keeping students who choose virtual engaged with their classmates in the classroom. Outside of the classroom, birthday parties, and so forth, and again, I'm assuming those are normally done still, or with restrictions maybe, but I don't see that changing for parents being inviting who they want to socialize, or parents saying, okay, let's get, 4 kids together, let's go to McDonald's for dinner one night or so forth. And again, depending on what's going on with restrictions, but I don't see any of that being prevented for that still happening. I do understand that there is less direct interaction and socialization for students that do virtual. But I guess I would look at that. That's a choice as a parent. You've got to look and weigh what's in the best interest of your child and where you guys are comfortably. And
right. I was just trying to find out if there was a resource that we were going to have available to us to be able to figure out who those other families were.
I don't know of how that would be articulated other than through word of mouth and, just as we do with a small community. Like if I said, we had an exposure in the elementary school and the kids talk, eventually someone's going to know who that exposure is.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't think there's a formal. I think the difference in this one, and there are other virtual programs out there like K-12 online. I think the biggest difference that I see in these two is this still connects kids with their classroom friends and their neighborhood kid. It's a live conversation that they're having with their teacher.
Okay.
Do you have another question, I thought?
Nope.
Okay. Any other questions?
My question kind of piggybacks off hers a little. My concern is how these children are going to be recorded and videoed all day at school. We know how children can speak and be abrupt and say things that are inappropriate, or we have bullying situations or behavior situations that are in class. Now these, from the sounds of it, I didn't realize this video is going to be recorded the entire day and shared. It sounds like live or even possibly recorded where they can view it at a later time. Where does the privacy and safety rights come in for the kids that are in class? I kind of think it would even piggyback off her question, because I thought it would just be one teacher is going to be recorded all day. And so all of the virtual kids would be in that room along with peers that are live in person in our building, in our mortar building. So like if I signed my waiver in my handbook saying I don't want my kid videotaped or photographed, then those kids would possibly be in a room that are not recorded all day long. Does that make sense?
The videotape and recording is on the instructional areas where the teacher is. So if you envision, I don't know what grade your students are in, but if it's an elementary student, let's say, that the whiteboard is, or actually any grade level, the whiteboard is the main instructional wall. That's where most of the instruction is done in terms of direct instruction. So the camera is focusing on the teacher and the whiteboard, not the kids in the classroom. Where the kids in the classroom may come in is if the camera is moving from point A to point B, you may get the backs of heads or heads of kids, but it's going to the next instructional wall. It's not focusing on the kids in the classroom, with the exception of when you're doing discussion. If I'm a virtual and you are in class and our teacher says, okay, get with Brian and you guys, I want you to discuss it and work out this. We may be in a Teams meeting, a Microsoft Teams meeting, where we're talking over the laptops in the classroom, and we're talking and having that conversation. The kids in the classroom, so that would be an interaction with kids. The kids in the classroom, if there's a group discussion in the classroom, the camera is not focusing on the kids. You're hearing the voice of the kids in the classroom, but the conversation, the teacher has the ability to put the virtual kids up on the monitor or on a TV screen so that the kids in the class could see their classroom. But that is a downfall of the system. It doesn't allow the other way where the camera, unless you intentionally move the camera and focus on a student. But that's not the intent. The intent is the instruction, so the kids at home are seeing their teacher.
Okay, so why wouldn't all those kids be in the same classroom, and then they would have a community because they would see on the screen, much like we did from March until June, we saw the Zoom meeting in everyone's household, hear everyone's life, so on and so forth. Some people would forget to mute, things like that would happen. Why couldn't they then form their community and only one teacher has to deal with this, going back and forth, flipping between a virtual kid raising their hand and an in-person child?
So to do that currently, based on current numbers, we would have one teacher teaching 5 kids and 3 teachers teaching 85 kids. So your class size in the in-person would be a lot higher, and we're trying to keep the balance in the class size even among all of them. Because you may have that virtual student who 10 weeks after the course, they may want to come back into the classroom, where if they're coming back into the classroom that they've been part of, they know the routines, they know the teacher, they know the kids in the classroom. If I have a kid that's in a virtual classroom and they want to come back for live instruction, they're now the new kid in the classroom, and they haven't been part of that classroom community.
You definitely are building that community. I do agree with that. There are some benefits. When I first joined this meeting, I was very upset that my kid was going to be videoed. And you have enlightened me a little bit that if, for example, my child does get COVID and they're at home for 2 weeks, it is nice to know that they're still going to be a part of that. But then again, that's kind of like a HIPAA law, because now the kids will go home and say, well, now Susie was now in a virtual classroom on the screen instead of in room like she normally is.
And that is the caution that I said, or I mentioned earlier. You know, it's much like we do when we have a lice outbreak or something in a class, and we notify parents that we have a situation, but we don't say Brian has lice or so forth. We notify of the situation so that they can take precautionary measures for their own child. And so that would be similar, because you may choose to move back or forth depending on your personal preference. Things may get worse, and your comfort level as a parent and your own child may want you more in a virtual option. Things might get better where you've chosen a virtual option, and now you actually kind of see what's going on in the classroom and say, you know something, I think my child would do fine in that classroom, and want to go from a virtual to a classroom. I will agree with you from the perspective, this has been the challenge in the whole time, trying to accommodate both sides of the spectrum here of how education should look this fall.
So basically that form will not come home now that I do not want my child video or photographed, because that will not be an option now. There will not be one room that is not being videoed.
You will still have the form of formal videotaping and cameras, and not using them like on pictures when we post things in a newsletter and so forth. The second form that goes out is a notice that this is the system we're using, and your child may be in the image based on where they are and what's going on. It is only for the classroom, and that's why we went to Microsoft Teams rather than using Zoom. Anything can be compromised. There's not one system that's perfect out there from a security perspective. But Microsoft is much more secure the Zoom or the team meeting than Zoom. And so the teacher invites only those kids in the classroom to participate, rather than it being a broad, allowing everybody to come in.
Okay. My second question, I applaud the school board. I know our teacher contract does not have a maximum student per class. And I have heard rumors that you had to lay off some teachers, meaning class sizes now will get larger due to some layoffs. Do you have the ability right now to tell us the class max will definitely be 25 or 22 or 28, whatever that number might be, so that we know what the exposure rate is that we're sending our kids to into the classroom? Does that make sense?
I can tell you right now that there has been no, the change at the elementary school was a reduction of one section of kindergarten and one section of first grade. So there are 4 kindergarten teachers and 4 first grade. There are still 4 second grades and still 4 third grades. So we average about 100 to 105. I do not have in front of me the official count as of today for each grade level to give you that. So it is 25 to, I'm going to say 27 in a classroom. The teacher's contract does have a class max. Elementary, I believe it's 33, and 30 for, and secondary, I believe it's 35.
Okay, so we're
with the exception of middle school, because they have the 7-period day, their core classes are capped, I believe, at 27.
okay. Thank you for your time. I know these decisions are very difficult, and you'll never please everyone.
I can tell you this from the budgetary perspective: the reductions that were made, in general, the board had a hard time making them because they were some hard decisions. And the tenor is, if the dollars are there, they want to put programs and services for kids back. they also recognize the importance of lower class size. And I know there's a couple board members on here, Margaret and Chris. If I'm speaking out of turn, just holler. But I believe the board, if the dollars are there and we are not cut that, they want to put those programs back because they're making a difference in our kids' future. Is that a fair statement?
Yes. In the classroom, will the desks, for example, my daughter was in second grade last year, those classrooms were extremely small. There wasn't even a reading corner. I applaud her teacher for trying to use the space wisely. But they had 4 to 5 desks in a circle touching. I realize you don't have 6 feet. I understand that. But will the desks at least be apart and looking forward, or will the kids still be all touching like that?
I believe, again, I got to look at what we're writing in the plan. I believe the recommendation is that they are spaced out facing in phase 4. I think that's a requirement that we have in the social spacing.
Okay, thank you.
In classrooms,
Just for some reason, those second grade rooms are so small in comparison to the kindergarten and first grade room.
They are there, and each room is a little different based on the layout and where things are located. I know as the staff are looking at the room and planning of their instructional areas with the cameras, they are. I've heard several of them say, "Okay, I need to rearrange or take this out of my room because I'm not going to use it all the time, and I'll bring it in when I do use it." Just in general conversations, I think that's going to be a look that they're all going to have to begin rethinking how their classroom's laid out.
Okay, thank you for your time.
No problem. Anything else?
So I have a concern more than a question, I guess. I don't know that there's really an answer. But let's say there are kids that definitely have trouble paying attention. And to have them sit in front of a computer for 7 hours is too much to ask. So the choice should be to send them to school, but let's say they are forced to stay home for whatever reason. What happens when they just cannot handle sitting at a computer for 7 hours a day? Maybe they try and then they're just bouncing all over the house and they're not getting anything out of it. I mean, I'm sure the teachers are thinking about this, and I'm concerned about that.
You're absolutely right, and it's been brought up on multiple occasions among not only some teachers that I've talked to specifically, but also with Mrs. Lashbrook, the special ed director. There are things that we can put in place depending on the student. And I'll start from the one end where they have an IEP, and the IEP can be structured so that instruction is limited. So it might be 15 minutes and then a 15-minute break, and it's part of the IEP if they are a virtual student, because we have to create an environment that's in the best interest of the student. If they don't have an IEP, the next phase is we also have kids with 504 plans that we make accommodations for and we adjust. We give them scheduled breaks. We have kids right now who are in person who we give scheduled breaks because we know they can't last an entire time period. So we purposely schedule break to create some success for them throughout the day. That can still happen with the virtual. There's nothing that prevents that. So if there are concerns where we have a student that, they're good through the first half, and it may be a phase-in. Maybe it's the first couple of weeks might be, let's get through the morning, let's create a half-day schedule that works. And then we add on, the other half a day. Those are things that between the teacher, the principal, and if need be, the special ed director or Mrs. Lashbrook, the student support services person, that's where we have that conversation. There's nothing that prevents us from not doing that other than ourselves. And I think that is the beauty of it, that we have, that we can create breaks like we do for kids in class for virtual kids.
All right, thanks.
I have a question.
Yep.
In regards to the size of the classrooms, I had thought maybe they would be smaller. It sounds like they're going to be around the same size. You said you didn't have the numbers right now. Will you be able to post that somewhere of where you see each grade's room size, like you were going to do for the other parent in her question for the chemical?
I mean, that's easily, it's easily done. I'm going to just say it's going to change a lot, and here's why. During the summer months, we get requests for records for families that have moved that we did not know about, or that have opted for another school arrangement, or we are registering kids coming in and they don't get in the system till they're finished with the registration process. So the plus and minuses of classes are going to go up through really the end of August. Secretaries do not come back until August 17th is their first day back. So that time is, they have a stack of mail they're going through. They're looking for CA60 requests or CA60s we've gotten from other districts. And so to get really a definitive number, it really isn't until the week of the 24th that we can start narrowing that down. In previous years, that's when I've had the conversation with the board about adding a section. You know, our numbers in kindergarten are high. We need to add a 5th section because we're getting close to that class max or what realistically is possible in a classroom. That, whatever, I think it's 33 for elementary, so that is almost impossible to put 33 kindergartners in a classroom. Just the physical layout of the classroom is, so we do have to take that into consideration in terms of just the space. So I could put it up, I can put it up tomorrow and say, here's the class sizes as of now, but I can say for certainty that will change.
Now, do you guys have, are you guys going to go off of, like you said, like 33 or, you know, something like that? Are you guys willing to go up that high in your class size, or are you guys maxing it at a certain number? Because even in regards to preschool, which I have sent my daughter and my son, those classroom sizes as well are quite large.
I think the preschool are 18, I think they are, with the 2 adults, and that gives you the 22. It might be a little off on the count, but they're close to that. I have never, since I've been here, advocated for 33 kindergartners or 33 elementary kids in a class. I have never. From a philosophical, former elementary principal, former elementary teacher, I don't believe that is good for anybody. Kids, teachers, it's just not. So I will do everything I can to find the dollars, reallocate dollars with the board to keep them. My goal is no more, around 25 is my target number.
Okay.
And to be honest with you, I would like to see that lower for kindergarten first, because developmentally, kids develop at all different stages. And so teaching kids to read or math concept, some kids it takes longer and they need more of that individualized attention. We have kids, and I was one of them when I was growing up. I had behavior issues in kindergarten at first because I just was that antsy boy. But at some point it kind of clicks and the development and things start changing. That varies by student. So for me personally as a superintendent, 25 is my target. Have we gone 26, 27? Yeah, it's uneasy for me. I have never requested to the board to go up to 37 or 33 for elementary.
Okay.
The only way I would foresee that being forced upon us to happen if the state were to make the cuts and now we got to start cutting into the classroom. And we got to actually start affecting the education that we give our kids by class sizes.
Okay.
And I could say the board that I've worked with over the last 6 years has done what we can to try to keep those numbers low.
Okay. And then just into what you said about kindergarten and first grade and the reading and how important that is, and the developmental, part in reading that happens at that grade and that age. My daughter was first grade last year, so a lot of that was cut short. She doesn't struggle at this point, but I do wonder about so much that she could have missed that hands-on learning. Will there be some type of like catch up or, with the following year coming forward that may look a little bit different?
Are you talking for the 2021 school year or the 21-22 school year?
This school year coming up.
Okay. I would say that what your concern is a concern of every teacher that we have, because they all realize 6 months of and I don't want to say lack of instruction, because it's not what they got, and each child is very depending on the involvement of the parent versus what was done at home. But that is a concern of all staff walking into the door come this August. I would anticipate us being putting in some support services for our summer programs next year to do some remediation with kids. We chose not to do it this year because of all the restrictions we had with in-person learning and virtual learning. I know the ISD is running a virtual learning. We have some of our kids that are involved in that, but it's not the same as an in-person learning. My plan is to use our 31A dollars and title dollars for some summer programs next year, where the dollars are. On the flip side, our allocation of Title I is expected to go down, which is the federal dollars. And so the pot of money that we have gets spread thinner and thinner. We are still planning on title services at the middle school and elementary school. So if we have a virtual student and they are an at-risk student identified, they would receive intervention services from Title I. It may look differently than an in-person. It may be a scheduled block where Mr. Pedri or Mrs. Wilson or one of the, that's Mrs. Wilson retired, I'm trying to think of Mrs. Kath, might be a scheduled time where they're working with students and focusing on a specific strategy that they're lacking in. But they still would get Title I services if they qualify, or 31A student services if they qualify.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Well, it's 9 o'clock. I appreciate the 2 hours you spent with me. My intent and kind of thinking through this is I want to be as open and transparent as possible. So once the plan is finalized and with the board, I'll be hosting some more of these meetings to kind of go over the actual physical plan with parents. I encourage if you have questions, shoot me an email, shoot your principal an email. We'll be more than happy to take into consideration as we're moving forward with our final plan and recommendation to the board. So I wish all of you a good evening, and thank you very much for joining us.